All right, good evening, everyone.
All set?
Yeah, all set.
Okay, I will call to order the special meeting of the Board of Education of the School District of North Fond du Lac, and roll call.
Maffey.
Here.
Huck.
Here.
Goldowski here. Geckerman.
Here.
Yeager.
Okay, report on public notice.
Everything was sent to our local, we had it posted outside in front, and our, actually, our, what should we call it, the BMP station, so we're all good there too, so.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. If we can stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. And the next item is the Trefford Way presentation. Welcome all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks. This is a special meeting, and we have some time to share, learn about what's currently going on at Trefford, but also some more pertinent topics that we want to go through throughout the time. I'm going to, hopefully everybody gets a chance to introduce themselves. Maybe we just go through that really quickly. We got a really awesome cast of people here already. So if you want to go down the line, that'd be great.
Sure. Meg Petty.
Alan Patterson.
Debbie Ellington. Hi, everybody.
Emily Dillon. Good evening.
Nikki Soni.
Ed Jedlicka. Nick Protaski.
Karen Bertelt.
Beth Dardis.
Tiffany Dolan.
So they're going to share out quite a bit of information tonight, and we're going to be working together to try to share with you what's going on currently. But I'm going to lead off with Nick Protaski, who's from CISA 9 and also helping out with talking about the charter and charter agreement. He's going to talk a little bit about authorization within charters to give us a little more background information. So Nick, welcome.
Yeah, thank you all for letting me be here. And I gave you way more information in these slides than we're gonna be able to cover in this short bit, but I knew you'd get that ahead of time, and I wanted you to have it. But a lot of times this workshop or these slides would take 2 or 3 hours when we're working with school districts, just really helping you as a board understand what it means to be an authorizer on the other side of the contract for charter. And so I just want to highlight a few things, and then if there are, I have some business cards that I'll pass out too. And if we come across some things that we don't have time to discuss tonight, we can check in at another time, or we can sort of grow this learning. But I sort of want to get it all out in front of you. I haven't worked with your group. I do work with the Wisconsin Resource Center for Charter Schools. We're partnered with DPI, partially funded through DPI. And we work with all the school districts in the state, especially the authorizing school districts. There's 100 school districts in our state that authorize charter schools. But I'm really excited to share some of this with you. So just out of curiosity, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of charter school?
For me, it's a specialized school that fits a particular need the community has.
And without all the typical public school regulations and rules and things.
Alternative learning styles.
Unique learning.
Yeah. So it's a non-sectarian school, right? So it's created through a contract. So it's really, the word charter comes from that. It's a contracted school between you as an authorizer, right? And another entity that has to be, a legal entity in the state that can officially go into an agreement. And inside that charter, it basically tells what the school is. So sometimes it's an alternative pathway. Sometimes it's a different way of learning or a different staffing structure. It could be a lot of different things. We do have, like I said, 43,000 or over 43,000 students in our state go to charter schools. There's over 236 of them, and like I talked to you about, there's 100 authorizers, 93 of which are school districts. And you can see it's all over the state as well. We have a large majority in some of our more populous areas, which you can see. So this is what we see on the 6 reasons of why a school district would have a charter school. And I think as you hear tonight from the Trefford Way folks, I think they're hitting on a few of these, but it really is an incubation center. It's a way to try something new. It's a way to take a subgroup of students that you might have identified as a school district that are not learning, and maybe by having a specific design school, you can sort of address that. It allows you to potentially have different strings or different levers to pull when it comes to accountability, because you can revocate a contract. You could have different ways for that accountability to happen. Sometimes it's financial sustainability. It's a way to bring in outside money. It's a way to bring back your homeschool families, or it's a way to open and enroll other students that could stabilize things for your school district. It could also be a way to keep staff and have that retention. It's a community connection. I think you'll see tonight with the Treffert Way, there's a really strong organization, the Treffert Center, that's partnering with your district with this charter school. But we see business partnerships, we see college partnerships with different charter schools, and then also it just provides a family choice. And when I use family, I use it as educators too. There are oftentimes educators would say they are having a second career by teaching at a charter school, because it might identify differently than the other schools that they were in. So real briefly, and this is where, I'm gonna go kind of quick, a little bit of Michael J. Fox. You just watch me for the changes and try to keep up, Back to the Future line. So the contract is in the middle, right? And you as an authorizer are authorizing the school, and specifically you're giving them some autonomy. Maybe it's over their program, which I know for the Treffert Elementary School, there's large autonomy over kind of their typical day, some of their learning practices, right? You're also maybe over their staffing structure, maybe you're giving that to them in some of their financial decisions. But then what you should be having back as an authorizer is, well, what are we getting out of this deal? Right? What clearly, how do I know that this is meeting the needs of our district? Is there student learning outcomes? Are there financial expectations that you have where they're meeting a certain threshold, whether that's capacity or dollars, or is there other operations that you're looking? So clear performance measures should also be in that contract, so you know that it's a good deal. In our state, you have to have a contract for 1 year to 5 years. It can be anywhere in between, but the minute you ink that contract, you want to be thinking about it as a district, like, how do I know that we're going to renegotiate and have another contract again? How do we know that we're getting, we're getting what we said? We got to give them that autonomy to do things that are differently and free from some of those. But then how do we know that we're getting what we're hopeful? In a charter school ideally delivers that. That's different. The three things that are in state statute for you are to uphold best practices for schools. You're to encourage and endorse school autonomy. So you're encouraging that. You're not trying to take it back. But you are also, obviously, you need to assure student and public interests. So that kind of comes back to, that you're getting that benefit through that contract. This is really the last slide I'm going to kind of jump into, because there's a lot here. And I'm gonna stand up and kind of show you, because all of these factors are really in your charter school here in this district, which is really unique. So you as an authorizer have this charter school contract. And in that you have the oversight and assurance, and you're ideally monitoring them. You can have staff that does that too. It doesn't have to be you, right? You could have your superintendent doing the work, or someone in the office. And that contract is between you and the governance board. And the majority, if not all, the governance board is here. The majority of them are here tonight. They're their own legal entity. They have their own bylaws. They have their own meetings that have to have public notice and all those good things. And there's an agreement between the two of you. But here's where it gets kind of muddy, right? They're governing the charter school that's inside your school district. And there are things in state statute that they still have to adhere to because they're part of your school district. And so there are some direct services that are still coming from you, right? Dr. Mino's time is coming from you. Maria's time in the business office, as she is their fiscal agent, right? And when is Maria wearing the charter school hat as the fiscal agent? And when is she representing you as the authorizer? That can be kind of messy, right, with school districts. So that's just something that we kind of want to address, but there are services. There might be transportation and food service and some other things that you are kind of indirectly providing. And you could think about that as almost a separate contract. This is the contract to be a charter school. What else is in there? How much are people's time? How are we doing this with the food? And I see it spelled out in your contract, some of those services already that are in there. And then there's also outside service providers. They might be paying the Treffert Center to be giving them some professional development or some extra services. And so they would have another contract with other folks that are contracting directly with the school that may not be contracting with you, or may not be, working through the school district, but they're working directly with the charter school. The one thing that you need to know that's really important in a district authorized charter school is you cannot contract out your responsibility for a free and appropriate public education. So at the end of the day, it is still your responsibility as the school board, since they're inside your district, to make sure that all the needs of your students are being met. And particularly where that becomes alive and well is our students with IEPs. At the end of the day, you can contract out the services, but you can't contract out the responsibility. That's pretty much what I wanted to cover. I mean, there's so much more that we could hit on. I probably have 1 minute for questions. I gave you a couple more slides. It was just sort of spelling out some of the different roles in a couple of different ways that you could sort of see that. And I'll pass out my cards here.
Any questions for Nick before moving on to the second half of the presentation here?
No, but I guess I don't think I have a copy of the contract.
Okay. Yeah, we can get you that for sure.
So could I get a copy of that?
Well, does everybody have a copy of the contract here?
No.
Seems kind of,
Let's assume
we
we
should.
Yes, absolutely. All right, Rick, anything else? Any other questions?
I don't have a question. I just have a comment on one of the slides. I really liked get to it here where the title of the slide was "Great Schools Are Held to Great Expectations." And I think as leaders, we really need to start thinking about that, especially after the last meeting, when we saw the results of the state tests and we've seen those results for year after year after year. And we had the conversation, which I agreed with, that our students are just as good as anybody else. Our staff is just as good as anybody else. So that means something's missing, and I think it's leadership. I don't think we have set great expectations for our schools, not only the Traffic Way, but all the schools. And I think we accept mediocre performance. And we don't make our expectations clear, even amongst the board members. I think we all have different expectations. And I know you're in the process of putting together the strategic plan, which hopefully we can be the glue that starts to bind us together.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought this sentence, great schools are held to great expectations. And I look at myself and in my opinion, I'm not sure we've been doing that. I think it's something for us all to think about.
Any comments, questions, clarifications before moving on to the second part? Thanks, Rick. Okay, let's jump into the other slide deck here. All right, so I don't know, Doctor, do you want to start off, or do you want to give the overview here quickly, or?
Yeah,
let's-
why don't you kick it off?
Okay.
And then it's, because we spread this around,
Sure.
and as you come up, what are you laughing
Nothing. You just make me laugh, Alice.
at? I know. Sorry, it's just a thing that goes on.
I guess I want to start by saying I've had the opportunity already to work really well with this board and members of the board, as well as the school, the last few months, and I've learned a lot. And at the same time, it's part of this position too. Like Treffert Way is a part of our school district. And how do we work and bridge? And that's where I'm going to really start off with. We got to continue to bring that message, and that all of our kids are part of this district, including all of our Treffert Way students too. So with that being said, I really want to talk about like what we're trying to share today. And this is the board as well as myself here too, is we're trying to figure out and get the context for making a decision to implement a Treffert Way High School. As you're all aware, there was a high school grant that was passed. We're going to talk more about that in a little bit, but just saying, what does that look like? Is the feasibility, everything that goes along with it, with where we're at right now. Describe the lessons that we learned from the elementary school implementation and implications for the future, both at the elementary and high school. So there is a history here, and that history is very important to understand. And they're going to, I think, walk through that for you all as well, because that really tells a story of like really handling and looking at that context of that decision later on too. Discussing the importance of the unified operational structure, and I alluded to that already, the importance that we're all in this together and we can make this work together, but we need each other to make that happen. And then finally, discussing the impact of adding a high school for the district and what are the perspectives and questions that would entail with that. Fair enough? Dr. Patterson, I'm going to turn this over to you. It's scary, but I guess I will.
I got him in front of
There you go.
He's not having drugs or anything. Okay, I'm gonna ask, who am I asking? Deb, since you all know Deb, and Deb knows many of you. Deb, if you want to come up here and give us a brief history.
Oh, sure, glad to. Just slide right on. So, a lot of you know me from before. I was Pupil Services Director and Principal of ELC for a few years back, retired in 2018. But before that, there were some wheels spinning with some ideas over at ELC and in the special ed department. And I have to thank some of my people here, from Beth to Karen to Tiffany. And we started thinking about, well, we weren't seeing results in some of the traditional ways with not only special ed students, but students who weren't special ed. And what if we could do some things differently? What if we could use some different approaches, not just phonics? What if we could do some things like teaching using pictures, hyperlexia, all kinds of things? So Karen and Beth met with me multiple times in the little office at ELC. And pretty soon Matt Dow was involved in those conversations. And pretty soon Aaron Sadoff joined us in those conversations. And the idea for the charter school came about as a different way to teach kids. And I'm gonna let methodology be discussed in a little while, but that happened. I retired in 2018, and those ideas were probably floating around for a good 2.5 years. And we got the grant. We found out we got the grant just before I retired. And in 2018, I won't read all the stats up here, but we did sign the contract. There's the date that we signed the contract right before the school opened, which was in 2019. And we opened it down here, down the hallway a ways, down in FLC. And we were there for a year. You wanna slide that up one more for me? And then we'll go and we whoop the other way. And then we moved 1 year out to the Children's Museum on the northern edge of Fond du Lac, and we just kind of outgrew it. It was a great space, great partnership, lots of ideas and common things, but we needed more space. As students grew a year older, we needed to add a grade into the charter school. So that expansion came too. So then in 2021, we found presentation was open and expanded it to K-8. And this year we are a K-9 school, now 2 years in a row at presentation. The grant's 5th year ends in on June 30th, 2023 here. And so this is the last of the elementary grant. And then we last summer finished up and found out that we got the high school grant, but other people are going to talk about that. So just a little bit of history and giving credit where credit is due back here for some ideas that started with ways to help kids learn differently.
So just to get inside this for a minute, because I think this is a place we want to talk. The thought was we started out with K-6. And then it's like, okay, what happens to these kids in 7th grade? Well, why don't we expand it? So you'll see numbers. We started with 40 students. The next year we continue to have 40 students. And then we said, okay, well, now we're moving into K6. Now it's K7. Now it's K8. And at that point, we made a jump and went to 60 students. And I'm sure you're thinking or would want to ask, why would that be the case? Because we understood a little bit better about the funding mechanism. And if you can have students and we have a way that we're compensated for those students, then we were able to make that leap. And lo and behold, so we are now at grade 9, and then Ed will talk about the high school. It's like, okay, can we have a high school? Well, the first thing we got to do is write a grant. Writing a grant, as school doesn't mean it's implemented. It means it's written. What makes it real is when you sign a contract as the authorizer for us as the supplier. So it took me a while. I think it's been a real learning experience, I'll say for me, but for all of us. And Rick, I'm looking at you because it's like, okay, so where does this fit into, where's the accountability here? What does this mean? I want to look at the contract as well. You should, so that you can understand what it is we're on the hook for and what it is you're on the hook for. So the history here has been evolutionary, and we'll talk more about some of the lessons learned.
One quick question here, because I didn't see it uncovered in the rest of the presentation, was with this grant ending at the end of, or in June of 2023, what impact budget-wise does that have on the district? I don't know what that grant is paying for and what we'll have to pay for after that grant.
On the district right now, I mean, everything is not fun, like the grant can't fund like specific personnel, only consultants and other people to bring in for professional development. So the district has been
Okay.
financing the teacher-student ratio and other individuals within it so far.
Okay.
And the space.
And the space, right?
Okay, so that's, I'm sorry, because this is, I don't know how clearly this has been laid out for you, but that's the way it works. The state, Mr. Nick back here and his crew, when you get the money, is providing you with money to build with the thought of building long-term sustainability. And we'll say, well, wouldn't that pay for staff? No. What it does is pay for training and development and supplies and materials to get you going. And then it's good luck and Godspeed. What the authorizer agrees to is you will provide us with staff and everything that goes with that, and you will provide us with space.
Okay.
Good, bad, or indifferent, that's how it works. That's the agreement.
Well, that was good news to me because I was worried we'd have a budget impact in June, but we've already got it included.
Well, it's, right,
So,
we're there.
all right.
It is my pleasure to present to you.
Yeah, here.
Oh, okay, I know, I'm not going away.
Okay, like over. So we're gonna talk a little bit about the why. So I'm Meg. I think you guys all know me by now. I've been at a few of the meetings, but really appreciate you guys having us here today. My one regret is that we haven't been having this conversation sooner, and just making sure that we're information sharing along the way. So the why of our school, as Deb outlined for us, we had this history developing with the collaboration between the work of these fine folks behind me and the Treffert Center. And really in the research with Dr. Treffert, we were looking at, gosh, this approach just really works so well in a clinical setting. We were having some really high success with collaboration of treatment providers in Friendship Learning Center through an MOU we had signed years back. We thought, why doesn't this start to happen for all kids? Why is this only available for a subset of kids? And so the why really is to recognize that all of our students deserve a chance to have choice, right? They all have unique gifts and talents. And I think we're all here to really look at, okay, how do we do better tomorrow than we did yesterday in regards to education, right, and our collaboration. And so looking at that, the charter school, as Nick discussed, as Dr. Patterson discussed already, allows for that flexibility for us really to be innovative in our practices. It allows us to look at things differently from the times that we run in seat minutes, how we do measurement, how we provide curriculum. Looking at differences in calendars is one subset, or how we utilize teachers in the building. We really feel that there's a demonstrated need as outlined in our grant. Hopefully you've all read the high school grant too. If not, we're happy to provide that information because I think that will be really important as we move forward and look at the sustainability and feasibility. But the high school level really needs to look at how do we support and we say non-traditional learners here, and I would argue all learners, right? We know that education needs to continue to move forward, and charter really allows us a way or an avenue to do that. We know that the most successful organizations in the business world and in the general community are those that are really looking at how do we take opportunities to look at each individual and as Dr. Treffert said, teach to their talent, right? Recognize strength and foster that. So we believe education should take a similar approach, and that is the why of the high school in our grant. The how has really been a nice journey to look from that clinical application of the Treffert approach. And you guys have heard, I know when we had Adam Broughton and Tiffany, we would report back to you guys on kind of what we would call pillars. Even that we're recognizing has evolved, right? Because we're still learning and growing as we are about charter laws and all of those fun things. We're learning about education as well. And so it's an overlap of all of these things and not separate silos. And I would say that's something we really had in mind is just getting rid of the silos across our educational platform, but across our community as well. And I think that's where we've kind of gotten wrong. And we'll talk about what we've learned, but it really was our vision to integrate into the district a bit more than we've been able to this point. So we're looking forward to do that as we grow. So you guys have heard about these. I won't go through this in huge detail, except for that there's a few slight tweaks to what you've heard about from our elementary level to really address the needs of a high school. So again, authentically assessing, we've talked about personalized learning, making sure that we're really looking at that strength base for each learner. Place-based learning is really a new highlighted piece of the community in the high school grant and in our vision for our curriculum at the high school, which this is our planning year. So we've been hard at work starting those initial phases of planning. Relationships stay strong, that was highlighted in our elementary, but really kind of transitioning that system to that community impact. And how do we, I think our goal is that all of our students will leave our district and have a large positive impact on our community. They'll be successful in life and contribute back to our greater society. And so we're really looking at how do we do that and make sure that they're, the agents of our greater systems around us. Any questions about the why or the how? I spoke quite quickly.
I have a question.
Yeah. Yes,
Mr.
Matthew.
Besides the how, and if we could talk,
Oops,
I know this
back.
is directed at the high school, but I'm still trying to catch up on the grade school as well. So besides the how is like the who. So how do we select kids that are eligible for either the grade school or the high school? And how is this differentiated from the special ed that's at the schools today?
Right.
So kind of the who and.
That's a great question. I think you're skipping ahead to some of the lessons learned too. So we'll get there. No, we'll answer, but I think, sorry. But I think that's something that we definitely a lesson learned. If we were to go back and look at, how we've gotten to the population that we have in our building right now, we may have had other policies in place that we're looking at implementing this upcoming school year in regards to open enrollment. But the biggest thing to understand with the charter is that just as with the public school, we're open to all. So you enroll in our school, you apply. If there's a lottery in place, that lottery takes place because there's too many applicants and not enough slots. And we're open to all districts. It's at that open enrollment level. If they're outside of our school district here in North Fond du Lac, they need to dually also open enroll and be accepted through that. But as a charter, we legally have to be open to all.
But there must be, or I'm assuming there's a process that says, well, you're better suited to be at Friendship Learning rather than Trefford. Or if somebody decides they want their child to go to Trefford, they can apply no matter what?
They can, yes. So they can, it's a school of choice, so all parents can enroll. There have been some instances where we might not offer a particular service or have a particular IEP service, such as, self-contained classrooms or those things, because that's different than our model. Then that would be something that would be discussed with the family upon enrollment, that we don't offer that service.
And then the district would say, like, do we have the programs or needs that would be available for that student too? I mean, as the district, we're looking at it all, like, where does that student best meet? But students would come to us in North Fond du Lac and say, I want to apply into Trefford. And then we have to dictate whether or not, as a district, those students would even be able to apply based on that open enrollment. Okay.
And I think our understanding, and I don't want to speak for you guys, but I think your understanding may have been as well, previously, was that students could be accepted through open enrollment specific to our charter school. That was the impression that we operated under for some time. That is incorrect. And so once a student's open enrolled into the district, they're open enrolled into the district. It wouldn't be a specific charter school designation on their open enrollment acceptance. So that's changed our perspectives on enrollment moving forward a bit.
So the decision, the question of, well, would this child go to Truffert Way or ELC? That's the question you're asking, right?
That's one of them, yeah.
Yeah, we as Truffert Way do not decide that. Because, I mean, Nick, you can elaborate. We have to be, if someone applies to the school, they can be a school of choice. They're not there, we can't disallow anyone that applies. Now, there may be some, if we don't have the services available, then that might be a reason why that child wouldn't attend Truffert Way. But is accepted into the district, then it becomes the district's responsibility, which I'm not trying to pass the buck here, but it's a fair question, because it's like, okay, we'll make the decision. We don't make that decision. What we can say is, can we handle, are we equipped to deal with the needs of the student using this approach, if you will?
So what would happen if somebody was inside the district, so it wasn't an open enrollment? So if somebody new moving into the district wanted to go to Truffert Way, do we have any class size limits? Or we have size limits at Truffert Way that if we're filled up, then that student would go to FLC or bands or wherever?
And could they be put on the waiting list?
They could apply during our enrollment period.
Yeah.
Yes, and then if they apply post that, they'd go to the end of the wait list, but we have limits on when we accept students throughout the school year as well, written into our contract.
And so with that, if there are, I don't know, I'm just gonna make up numbers, 100 kids that are open enrolled, and there's kids from our district that you could take care of, would the open enrolled get bumped out and our in-resident kids, what am I saying, be first on the list?
No. So once they're open enrolled into the district, they are now a district student. So while they may not reside within the boundaries of the school district of North Fond du Lac, because they have an open enrolled, they're now your student.
And as a district, we have to open enroll them first. And then that process goes to the charter. Now, this is where the context of learned workings has come up now. And so I think just listening more of that story, you'll get a better picture of the why here.
Yes.
It's a fair and great question. The decision on open enrollment is made by you, not us. And I think there may have been some confusion in the past on that. It's like, well, that's pretty neat.
And there were certain stipulations from the grant, right, when we accepted that grant, that we had to follow throughout the duration of the grant. So that will, when the grant sunsets, also sunsets, so we will be able to look at our enrollment procedures for this upcoming year for the elementary level differently. For the high school level, we'll still be able to look at our enrollment procedures, but there are certain stipulations by accepting the grant funds that we have to follow. I think that's all for me.
Meg's
Don't be so sure. I know somebody can get you after hours here. Let's move on to Ed. Ed authored the high school grant and has been a big contributor. Also, Dr. Ed is a rock star at the Trefford Center. And so I'll let him tell you about the high school grant, what's new. Of course, Ed. You haven't memorized?
All right, so this is the Trefford portrait of a graduate. So as we were writing the grant, we looked at what do we want the kids of our high school to have upon graduation? Because as we know, that transition period is a difficult one, but we want our students to be employable or to be able to go on to post-secondary education, whatever it is that they choose. But these 5 areas or 5 circles we feel are critical for them to have as they graduate. So we have a education committee, and Nick and I meet on a weekly basis to look at the design of the school and to look at all these specific areas, and then eventually develop the standards and the content that our teachers will actually teach based on these 5 areas. And these 5 areas, of course, were developed under Dr. Treffert's philosophy, or the pillars of the Treffert approach. So as we were designing the elementary school and had the high school in the back of our minds, I think that we look at a traditional school where the students, when they go into the school, they have to fit in whatever is happening in the walls of that school. And sometimes they don't. And our philosophy is kind of the opposite, where we fit the child. So it's a little unique as to the approach that we take. So our goal is for each student to find success when they may not have had success at the school that they were originally at. So you're going to hear neurotypical and neurodiverse students a lot when you talk to anybody that's involved at the Treffert Way, whether it's the elementary or at the high school. So I hope that makes sense. And, I could talk for 20 minutes or 30 minutes, but I'm not going to do that. So that's just kind of an overview of the philosophy that we intend for our high school.
So you look at that and say, okay, how different is that than a traditional high school? Well, I personally think it's a lot different, because the emphasis when you look at these areas, a fair question is to say, well, how do you know if a student is doing that or got that? And so the criteria, the staff's done a great job, and this is a labor of love, to figure out what could you do. We talk to parents, and we have 2 parents on our board. It's like, my child never liked school, they love school. So parents and kids are our biggest advocates, and they can articulate this. If you look at it and say, well, how well are we doing? The kids have to take the state test. I just looked back at the 2 report cards we had. One was we were meeting expectations, and the other was, it was a different type of rating, but that we were satisfactory. So it's not like we're out of it. But to your point, can we get better at it?
Well, let me interject there, because I looked at those reports and I was surprised that if you look at the math achievement score, which I'm more worried about the achievement score than anything else, the math achievement score at Treffert Way was better than Horace Mann, better than BAMS, and just a little bit behind Friendship.
Yeah.
So they were above our district achievement number at the Treffert Way in math, which I find remarkable.
Well, that's the beauty when you can find what that area is, because that's, I don't want to say the leverage, but that's the philosophy, is once you get a child, you speak to their interests and work with their interests, then other things can happen. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
I think it's when we talk about the design of the high school too, and this is a big thing that we're going to have to talk more about. Our thoughts about design are the kids will, have kind of a home base, but because we have a relationship with SSM Health, and specifically the Treffert Center, we have what's the new Treffert Studios, is a place where our students could possibly go as well to work on their strengths. And then the Cristo Rey Ranch is another facility that we have access to that the kids could also go. But the important thing is where is the high school going to be located? And that's something that we have to we have to discuss.
And could you talk a little bit about our thoughts on just briefly mastery transcripts? Because I think, as we look at measurement and holding ourselves accountable, how we measure our students, does it tell the whole picture? Or do we need to delve a little bit deeper? I think that.
On mastery?
Yeah.
Do you mind talking about that? Because I'm not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, put him on the spot.
So typically, a transcript, right, is credit-based. And really, when you scale back credit-based, it's time-based, right? So how much time did they spend and still got a passing grade? And so you get a traditional transcript that's based on, your 23.5 credits, which is what your district has. And that means that they spent that amount of time in a class and got a satisfactory final grade. Well, mastery transcript is the angle that the Trefford High School is headed towards, and that transcript will spell out all the things the student can do, and not necessarily how much time it took them. So if they were able to do something in 10 minutes, that spell it out on the mastery transcript, and it needs to be a piece of evidence attached to every single one of their abilities, and it would all fall underneath one of those 5 areas that you see up there on that slide. So their transcript, when it's all done, will tell you all the things that they're able to do. And so you'll see what they're mastered at. And it won't necessarily tell you how much time they spent in ELA. It'll tell you all the different things that they can do in ELA.
What's ELA?
English language arts. So there will be a prescribed amount of expectation that each student would be able to do in order to graduate. And if that takes them 10 minutes or 10 semester hours or whatever, the expectation of the school is not yet. Well, then we need to keep working on that until they're mastered at that. And that is what gets you to graduation. Not how much time you spent with a passing grade, but that you graduate with all the credits. Now, what's nice about with the Trefford approach is it's strengths-based. So a student would be able to have a minimum expectation in each of those core areas that they have to have mastered in order to graduate. But then it would also allow in your 8.5 credits that you have in your school district, in those 8.5, it would allow them to hit on different targets that they have more interest in or that they're stronger in. So everybody's transcript would look very different in what they're masters in. And that mastery transcript becomes a portfolio, it becomes a piece to get into college, or it becomes a piece that's a part of your interview process. When you go into a business, you can say, this is what I'm really good at. And these are the skills, and every single one of those things that I'm really good at, I already have a piece of evidence attached that I can share with you to show you that I've mastered that. So that's the angle with the design team that they're thinking about using. Again, it's just that builds on this idea of the student really understands themselves, right? They're strength-centered, they're self-aware, and they're diving deeper into something that they want to go into after graduation.
Thanks, Mike.
So is that typical for every charter high school or specifically in Trefford?
Are regular public schools using this concept?
In the state of Wisconsin, I think the portrait of a graduate, what you're seeing here is growing. I think that's becoming a bigger thing. You'll start to hear about it. I just got an email today that asked if someone, does that school have a portrait? So that's starting to become a little bit of a language. Mm-hmm. Dr. Mino, I'm sure you could speak to that. I don't know if they all use it in the same way. I think some districts would have a portrait of a graduate and they would say, these are the soft skills, which are actually the hard skills, but these are the soft skills that they need to know, and then here's all their academic content. I think what's unique about your model is that all the academic content is falling underneath this portrait. The mastery concept is not as well established, I would say, here in Wisconsin as it might be in other places around the country. I feel like, this is just an opinion statement, that's where education is headed. It's moving in that direction. I think where you would talk, where people would say schools are innovative, some of our districts that are maybe what people would consider nationally as innovative school districts are moving towards that mastery concept. That's how our businesses, right, are looking at when you go into any business, whether it's at Burke, right, or at something else. So I got to train you, and you got to demonstrate that you know what you're doing before you're allowed to do that thing. And it's not that you just need to sit there with a passing grade, but that maybe not enough to operate a machine safely and effectively. So we need to knock out all of those things. So I think it aligns with some of our our work-based partnerships and our business partnerships really well, sort of that mastery idea. And I also think it doesn't, to your point earlier about, holding students at a higher regard, it doesn't allow a 60% or a 70% to keep going. It says, no, you can't move forward until you've demonstrated your mastery, and it holds everybody accountable to say, we know what you know and we know what you don't know, and we need to work harder to get you to where you need to be.
And mastery transcripts been around for like 7 or 8 years. You can look up online. Really started with the private sector and private schools. I was part of the initial watching of that and happening, and I was like, where are the public schools? And this kind of the same question, and they were just so young in the work, but now there's public schools throughout the country who have now been part of it. I mean, there's an expense to it too, because they set up a really nice platform for your school based upon your pillars. And then working through that, you can see the whole child beyond just the GPA, beyond just the grade, the rank. Yeah, so you get some of those components that are really essential. And now you're seeing more universities and colleges looking not just at the GPA and class rank. It's like, we want to see the whole package. We want to see the portfolio of that child. And so this is a great way for them to illustrate that too. So.
Okay, that's it. Thanks, Nick. I don't want to blow through these because we've talked about these to some extent. Let me just say, I can speak for myself. I've learned a lot. I probably learned more than I bargained for. And I never have never have doubted the dedication of the staff and the work that they have done. They have made this school, have kept this school alive. I'm not saying it was ever DOA, but let me tell you, there's a lot of discretionary effort that goes into that building and those kids, as well as the board. It is a labor of love. The challenge that I see that we didn't fully understand, I'm speaking for myself, is how highly individualized the needs are and the scope of the needs that these kids bring to us. So what I thought was, well, maybe it's a classroom management thing, well beyond classroom management. I mean, they've had all the classroom management classes, and it's not that, it's a broader understanding of what these kids actually need. So when Meg talks about, and we alluded to the assessment piece, or what can you do coming in, that's clear that we want to have as good a handle as we possibly can. The second point really speaks to that. I don't think I ever uttered these words that we were the beacon of hope or the shining light for all of Wisconsin or the world when it comes to this. We really are a unique school. We are part of the North Fond du Lac School District. And if Dr. Mino has done anything judiciously and fairly to make sure that's true, that's why we're meeting tonight. I have to tell you, it's so that there's an understanding for all of us to say, we don't exist outside the North Fond du Lac School District. And so that's something that we have to work on. There's movement, and there's a lot more that needs to be done, as well as this third movement point about how we integrate with the larger entity. I think staff weigh in on this. I think we underestimated how much preparation, how much time the staff needs on their own, so that the frequency and the intensity of professional development it's just there. I mean, it's like flying a jet, as much goes, or launching a rocket, as much goes into the preparation as it does to the actual execution. And I think from a board perspective, we really underestimated what that is. It's like, okay, let's have a professional development day. Well, there's a lot to be said in terms of what has to happen. And then the sharing of the financial oversight between you and us, I don't know, weak, non-existent. it's not gonna be that way anymore. That's fair to say. But we've never sat down together and said, okay, walk us through this. How do you know? What does this look like? I mean, we don't want to get into the weeds of how the school, how the teachers, the autonomy they have in the classroom itself. But some of these other questions are fair, and I think we've got work to do. And then, of course, these considerations now is if we implement a high school, mind you, a child comes to North Fond du Lac and is enrolled in the district, we have that child, I say we collectively, till they graduate, just to be clear. So they say, well, you said, well, what if there were no Treffert Way High School? Well, a child's got to go somewhere in North Fond du Lac. That would be their first choice. So that's something that we need to pay attention to.
So when we talk about a better communication between the boards and the Treffert Way, I totally agree with that. I guess my question is, I think it goes beyond the board, right? So has Chris Schultz been involved with you guys the way she should be? Do the other schools and the staff at the schools understand what you guys do and how they could take advantage of that? So
let me take this one I think this comes back in the context of the history, right? And I think what we were alluding to a little bit before is created this awesome, unique opportunity, get excited. And sometimes that foundation is not built strong enough where there's a partnership back and forth, or there's not enough communication back and forth. And so this is just what I've observed and my perception, that I think through the time, there just was that separate entity versus us playing in that same sandbox together. And so now understanding that and really sharing that importance of the integration and that we're together in this, it's opened a lot of different things and doors and some things that we didn't notice before. So that's, be it like Chris Schultz or other players or other, building leaders, they're more knowledgeable now maybe than they've ever been before because of the fact that we're trying, again, to reconnect that integration point. And it's crucial to everyone's success.
I think it's key, and I'm glad that you're stepping up to that role.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot we've learned around that, for sure. Okay, around the high school itself, we see there are four major decision points. One is, how does this meet a community need? What will be the financial projection or impact of a high school? Where will it be located in the teachers and staffing? So I'm going to ask Nikki, Sonia, she'll walk us through the community need, especially.
I think one thing that didn't get mentioned tonight is the fact that with the high school, it is a separate charter. So with the lottery system, you're going to go back to implementing the school. So students who are in 9th grade at the Treffert Way school right now are not going to be automatically accepted into the 10th grade. It's open to all the North Fond du Lac students. So if a 9th grader at the high school here wants to go to Treffert Way, they have an equal opportunity next year as a Treffert Way student. Now, open enrollment is based, as we've said, on you guys. So if somebody from Fond du Lac wants to come just for high school, that's where you make that determination on the open enrollment. But the high school, in looking at what the community need is, it's also up to you guys to determine, do we need another high school? Is this something that we're going to see a plethora of students applying for? Now, we've had very successful lottery systems, correct, Tiffany? I mean, we're turning away students with every grade. You kind of have to get in at that kindergarten level, as you see in a lot of charter schools, because parents want choices and not all students are going to learn in the same way. So the community need is not just what we are seeing as a need for the Treffert Way students, but as for the whole district. And that's something we need to work with you guys on determining.
Well, that's where I guess I'm still confused apparently. So say the the high school opens up and you're not gonna automatically say anybody who's in ninth grade can go into the high school.
Correct.
But, so anybody can say they want to apply to the Treffert Way,
Into the lottery,
into
yes.
the lottery, but is there any screening criteria that we do that says, you know what, this is better off as a mainstream student, and putting them into the Treffert Way takes away from a student who really might need it compared to somebody that we feel would be successful in the mainstream school? Does that happen, or is it just lottery balls?
Tiffany, that's up to the parent, correct?
Well, I can answer that one. So first, we would hope to argue that our school would be a good fit for all and beneficial to all. And so while it may seem, and we need to do a better job as a governance board about our dissemination of our school, that we are specialized for those children who may learn differently or have neurodivergence. Really, we see this benefiting all students. And we do have students without IEPs at our school who are flourishing as well. When it comes to the enrollment into the high school, we'll be under the grant laws again, or the bylaws that we have to follow. And so we cannot have any additional pieces where we would evaluate children, decide based on needs or place. It would be whoever is drawn in that lottery that would be drawn. The only caveat to that is if they're out of district, they would have to also be open enrolled. So you could say as a district at open enrollment, we're closed to out of district students, or we're closed to special education students, or however you do your open enrollment piece would be the only stopgap between a student who was drawn in our lottery to an open seat attending our school. Does that make sense?
It does, kind of, but
If I could interject, that's been my understanding since the beginning, that you can't take all the applications and start sorting them by, well, we could do better with this kid, and, you know, it's an open enrollment basically policy.
Nor could the district say, if you have a student and maybe the entire IEP team or educational team believes that Treffert Way would serve the student well, you cannot place a student into our school. A charter is always a school of choice. So if that family, you can recommend, you could share information, but if that family doesn't choose to action an enrollment application, they will not attend our school.
Second question I have, then, in effect, would we have two separate charter schools, a high school charter, based on something you said when you started, and then the existing charter school?
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
So why does that happen? Like, why do we have, so if I am in our charter school, we said today, and I'm in third grade or third, and I go to fourth, I don't have to reapply for fourth, or do I have to get
You
selected?
do not, no.
So why, what's the why between ninth and then the high school charter?
It's the grant stipulations.
Okay, that's.
So,
The contract, yeah.
yes, so the additional information about that is if we are to fully implement this grant and implement this grant and take those funds, it's a bit different than our original grant in that the state has shortened that period to 3 years because of many reasons we can get into with their own funding. But at the end of 3 years, then we have to use all of that grant funding, all of these extra stipulations about enrollment change. Again, our grant sunsets, right?
Sure.
And so then we may decide if we want to renegotiate our bylaws or our contract to say students are automatically grandfathered in across schools. But at this point, the separate school. And that was important for the development that's needed for the difference between a middle school, an elementary school, and a high school. The applications in allowing us to look at things like mastery transcript more in depth. So that's the need to have that separation so you can truly utilize those funds to develop the content marketing.
And even now, if you have a fourth grade, they have a cap size for each class. But if next year you lose 3 students, parents move, job transfers, whatever, anybody in the district can apply in the lottery for those seats. Preference is given, and this is common of every charter school in Wisconsin. Siblings get preference because they don't want to break up families in school. So if I have an older child and a younger child, that younger child gets bumped up in the lottery system. but it follows the same lottery system as every charter school in the state of Wisconsin. So if you have 3 slots in 4th grade, some child is really struggling and wants to leave the district, they have this other option, which is a benefit, for you. And that's with your strategic planning, do you see this community need to have an additional school of choice? And for the high school, that's something we kind of need your help in determining for us. We think there's a need. My personal belief is you're going to see a lot of high schoolers apply for a school like this. Not all IEP, because I know kids, especially at the high school level, are looking for alternative ways. Now, I can't predict the future, but I do think there probably is a large need to have another option to keep kids in your district, but that's something you guys can work with us on.
So this is probably a really silly question, but when it comes to, I'm hearing, that, I don't know if conflict is the right word, what our district does or can do, or how we do things, and what the grant is allowing, or the stipulations you have. So do you have to have a grant to start a high school?
No. You guys could enter a contract with any provider to start a charter.
I'm not saying we shouldn't turn money away, but I'm just saying.
It's a fair question.
Mhm.
Very fair question.
It's a fair question. It's like, we have our opinions, but from a district point of view, it's like, well, wait a minute.
How much was the grant for?
$850?
No, that was
High school
original.
grant is $650,000 over 3 years.
There you go.
Like
So
And we
it's
have to
650.
use $150,000 by law this first year.
So 650 total in 3 years.
Right, and 150 is part of the preparation.
With PD and supplies, no staffing.
It's startup costs. So anything that you would consider operational costs would be a grant allowable.
Right, so we're gonna add FT.
Yes.
I saw.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
We'll get to that with staffing too.
And that's really where the crux of it is figuring out that long-term financial stability for all of us, and looking at what successful charter schools have been out there, what have they done. We've done a lot of work and research in that area, but it really will take collaboration with all of you to figure that out.
And so, we also have those students to consider that are going to be, where do they go next year?
Right.
And they are your district students. And so, a majority of them are going to be the ones applying, obviously, for the lottery. They're very happy there. Our attendance records are through the roof. We have higher than anybody, statewide attendance
I think
records.
so.
Kids want to be at the school. Some parents move for their kids to go to this school. The school, if you go online and, if you have a twice exceptional student, we have a lot of twice exceptional students. There's not a lot of school that can meet the needs of students like this, but those aren't the only students that are at this school.
I'm not sure people know what that is, twice exception.
Twice exceptional are kids who are both special needs, but also highly gifted, which is where you're seeing those math scores.
All right.
There are some very brilliant students at this school. And so, and some kids that just can't learn in a traditional environment. That's why we have alternative schools, and, we're looking at, the ability to meet the unique needs of students, smaller class sizes, staff that's trained in many different ways in looking at the students' strengths. It's not that you don't have the staff that can do that in your schools, but your structure isn't set up like that as this school is. So, we need to also, though, get some buy-in from the current high school administration and staff on this, and that's where we want to work better with you guys and the administration to make sure that if there is a demonstrated need, and there needs to be a lot of collaboration on some programs, and we already are collaborating well with band, and the students are participating in all of the district programs, but I think at the high school level, you're going to see a lot more of a need for that too. So this is kind of what we need to consider in opening the high school, and what you need to consider in being the sign off on it. Is there a demonstrated need from the community for this?
Well, just on the the buy-in from the current high school. In my assumption, that is if the board is in favor of this and you're part of that decision, that we'll get the buy-in we need from them, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we work with, our leadership to try to, like we want that integration, just like I was saying before. And I think it's a lot of learning yet because people just don't know what they don't know yet.
Right.
And so.
But you'd make that happen, right?
That's what you got me here for, Rick.
Yeah,
That's right.
there's compliance and there's buy-in, so I think we can guarantee that.
But Samantha and the counselors helped with preparation of the high school too. So they obviously saw the need. Obviously.
Right, I'm not saying, I don't know if they're in favor or not, I just got the implication that we need their buy-in, and my point is if the board agrees and that agrees,
Right.
then that shouldn't be an issue.
Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you.
Okay, financial implications here. We're talking about 20 students in grades 9 and 10.
Should we explain that a little
Please.
bit, the 9 and 10?
Do you want me to?
Yeah.
Yeah, let me tell you a little bit, no names and everything due to confidentiality. So incoming ninth graders that we anticipate would, want to go to Crawford Way High School. There are currently 7 in the elementary building now. And one child has an IEP for autism. 4 out of 7 are open enrolled from Fond du Lac and 3 are from North Fond du Lac. All of the students would be eligible from North Fond du Lac if there is no high school of Trevor Way. In terms of incoming 10th graders, we currently also have 7. All 7 of those have an IEP. They're in autism and speech. Only 2 of those are open enrolled and 5 are from Fond du Lac. Or 5 are from North Fond du Lac, excuse me.
And just to be clear, because we wrote the grant for 10 through 12, in our working with our educational team that Dr. Jadlicka referenced earlier, we're really looking at if we open this high school to expand to doing 9 through 12, like the traditional model, and moving our current charter K to 8. So that's where the grades might not match up with what you have read in the grades.
And these students have been coming over to the middle school for band and chorus, and one is taking 2 courses at the high school.
In the past, we were given a figure of $17,500 per student for a reimbursement, if you will, to attend Treffert Way. That becomes part of our budgeting, as compared to $15,000 roughly for a general ed North Fond du Lac student. So that's kind of that's the yardstick that we've been using.
It's actually 10 for regular, 15 for special ed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That should be changed. Well, I'll make sure this is corrected, because I'm sure these are figures that you'll want to look at closely. As we mentioned, the charter school grant now for the high school is $650,000. That's non-labor related cost that can be spent on. And because of our staffing needs, currently our elementary budget is operating on a deficit.
And that's due to the 17.5 versus the 15 or 10 that they're receiving coming in. And that disparity created a deficit for the upcoming year.
So that $650 can be used for building cost?
No.
So when it says building of capacity,
That's another term I would use as consultants. It means long-term capacity, as the capacity of the school, meaning that the capability, what the school can offer through professional development and supplies and materials. It's not referring to
like developing the curriculum and things like that.
precisely.
That's a bummer.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only types of tangible things the
It's a
grant can
bummer.
pay for is like those initial purchases.
Right.
So if we have 20 students year one, you could buy whatever device they need to access the curriculum. You could buy a van to transport them, the one-time startup cost.
Furniture,
Furniture.
but not bricks and mortar.
Correct.
Correct.
But then once that we move into year three, only the 10 new students can get a device. It would update for our other students. So it's that startup initial cost.
The site, Matt, you want to talk about this?
So again, talking about bringing building leadership in, we had a conversation a few weeks ago, just talking about what does that possibility look like for if we're looking at the 23-24 school year, where is there a place that can meet the need of the size of what we're talking about right now? And there were several different suggestions or solutions that were brought to the table within that. And this was also a disclaimer, almost like a 1-year possibility because of referenda and changing in building structure and size at the middle school and the high school. So just keep that in mind. But at FLC, really seeing there was around 2 classrooms that we could potentially use for the given year, as well as early learning center. There were a couple different classrooms we could be creative with as well there. So those were really kind of the things. At this time, there's no space at FDL. I'm still doing an audit on space and how things are used there completely, but just in terms of BAMs and Horace Mann, we don't have separate, spots where they could be the full day without moving a lot of stuff around right now. And that's why we kind of we're pausing on that, looking at this for a year. And this is a possibility if we were to continue with the high school charter.
So I think, well, correct me if I'm wrong, it's been talked about for a little while about this, having this expanding to a high school, right? So I'm assuming for whatever reason that wasn't, I'm unclear why that wasn't taken into account when we're looking at space that we went to referendum with. I don't know why Aaron didn't consider that. Because now he supported going to the high school. And that was what it seemed to have been a good time to say, well, we're doing a referendum, let's find the space. But that doesn't seem to have been the case, right? Do I have that correct?
You got it correct. Okay, one more consideration here and then we'll wrap up. Yes, there would be an increase in staffing. And the recommendation is it would be 1 FTE for classroom teacher with getting an alternative education license. My understanding is there's more flexibility with that license in terms of what they can teach. We're suggesting that there's also a paraprofessional that is added to support that classroom teacher in the high school, and that there would be a half-time special ed teacher based on the fact that we have roughly 50% of our students that are special ed. Now, the question is, what happens in year 2 and 3 until we get the high school built out? As it stands now, I know this is not the magic answer, but we would need staff. And that's the bugaboo, really. I mean, it could be, and we hope, I mean, who's to say if we do this, if our board votes to do this, if you vote to do this, it's possible that there will be a sharing resources, meaning that I don't want to blur the lines between the 2 schools, but there could be shared assets or shared resources, teachers. I'm calling a teacher an asset, that's not. So how that would all work out, I can't tell you, but it's a fact of life here. I mean,
So there's a couple different, so obviously this is the charter for the high school, and then we've got the charter for the elementary. There's also deficit in the elementary that we're trying to figure out, and that might be some relocation or reallocation of staff so we can meet the needs and come close to, getting back to green or some, black within that. This is this comes to like additional FTE that we'd have to provide. And, when you look at a classroom teacher, you're looking at, anything from 180 to 200 for the person. I mean, if we're talking max out for compensation and including insurance and all those other things, plus you get your paraprofessional, that's around 64,000. Another FTE for, 0.5. Again, there's cost here, all right? And we also, and I don't know if we get to this slide or whatnot, but, you asked about Chris and Tiffany have been kind of working at like, who are the kids that would be coming in and what would that cost if we didn't go with the charter? I don't know if that's a latter slide.
Well, it's not, but I had to at least address that. So that would be kind of enclosed where we're headed next. So why don't you?
Yeah, so when we took, I think Deb, you indicated there was like around 20. What was the total student number?
We currently have 14.
14.
We're looking at 20 with open enrollment, 20 students, maybe 10 per class.
Not necessarily with open enrollment, but with
Not-
the
no,
enrollment.
With
Right.
the enrollment, not open enrollment, sorry.
And when we were looking at this too, just the breakdown, okay, so this is like using our current staff within Horace Mann. So current special ed staff. We know we can, take some of those students, put them on a caseload of another individual to assist with some of those students transfer over. We also know that some students on that transfer are not needing IEP services. So they would go into regular ed classrooms. So that's about 2 students. 3 students would go into that kind of like caseload. And then there's about 8 students that we would still have to think about, like, how can we best service them? And to be real, I mean, it would be more in the line of, looking at another 1.0 for a classroom teacher to make sure that we're meeting those students' needs as well as potentially other students within Horace Mann right now to best service them. So a little bit different than 2.5, we're looking at like a 1.0 and potentially an aid as well. So you're looking at kind of the same scenario, but in in Horace Mann where they're picking those things up. But that's a real rough, setting with this in lieu of looking at, this as well.
And because that's really, I know the staff has brought this to our attention. We'll be meeting with the staff on Wednesday. One of the considerations is if there were no high school and these children needed the level of attention, if you will, that Trevor Way gives them, where will they go? And would it cost the district more? I mean, this is not what you want to talk about kids in terms of dollars and cents. The reality is, where is that best suited? And are we the best alternative? That's really what you would want to be looking at. And then it would say, okay, well, look what we have right in our back door here. Matt, I thought you could allude to the fact that that looking into an audit right now, really understanding the scope of these special.
Yeah, so like Chris and Tiffany are looking at all of our students in Trevor Way right now in terms of K through 8, including the students who are looking to be that kind of transfer student from 8 till 9 and 10. What are their needs? What are their support needs? How are their resources all met so that we can make sure that we're meeting them too? And I know that their staff has done amazing with what they have, but there also might be more services that they need within the K-8 servicing too, depending on what we find, to make sure that they're best, helped and supported throughout their worlds. And then the same thing I was just telling you before is that we're also looking at those specific students who are moving on potentially to, if there was no high school, Horace Mann, or if there was Trevor. The other thing about, the moving on to those students, even though they're like open enrolled in Trefford right now, and they're open enrolled in our district, they can choose if there is no high school for Trefford, they can make a decision whether or not they want to stay in North Fond du Lac or leave. And so you're also playing with about 4 students who could play in that arena too, say, I don't want to go to Horace Mann, I'm going to go back to the school district I was. So that would also reduce the number of students potentially at Horace Mann too, depending on how that family wants to move on that next step. So.
And their district has to take them back. Right?
Correct.
Yeah. Implications, I think these are very straightforward. We need, the reason, and Dr. Mino, thanks for setting this up as quickly as you did. We don't get the calls, that crew in the back, I don't get the calls, the crew in the back gets the calls. I understand this is under discussion, it's all public, we wanted this as a public meeting. We're having a meeting next week, that'll be a public meeting. As it should be, the point being is we want to be able to tell parents as soon as we can how this is going to shake out, both for the elementary and the high school. The obvious question around supporting the ongoing community needs, I would just reiterate, we know we as a community, Treffert Way community, there's a better communication job that we can do, and we will, which includes finding where the level of support is and getting it's going to take a special kind of teacher, as on a previous slide. And then the ability to market the school and recruit students, because we don't know. We don't know. You can open the school and it's like, okay, we're open for business, and it's the cricket. So I don't think that would be the case, but it's not going to happen unless we're out there. Here are the next steps. Walking through what's happening now is Chris and Tiffany, welcome back, Tiffany, are working through this audit. Meeting with you tonight, not the 6th, today is the 12th. Some of us from the board will go over to the school on December 15th this week to speak with the staff and get more of their input. Then we'll meet next Monday, as you will, but we'll be discussing these plans generally. In January, we're gonna have just parents discussions, open discussions with parent community members. We're gonna do that twice. Dr. Mino, I know you said you'd be there for one of those meetings, so you're welcome to attend by all means. And then we're gonna vote on this on January 23rd. So that we will understand, we'll have a proposal on the elementary and we will have a proposal on the high school, what the elementary structure will be and whether we're gonna vote for high school. That then goes to you. And we didn't talk about this. It's kind of hard to say, it's like electing somebody new. It's like, okay, get those votes over to the North Fonda Black School Committee, you got the school board. So I don't know whether you would be voting in January or you'd be looking at to understand what we've done. And I would make the pledge to meet with you, however we can do this, whether it's just a subcommittee or something to say, what's the thinking, where's it going? This won't be in. But whether you would make that decision in January or you do it in February, we'd like to get the process forward, enrollment process going in February. That's what we do.
Yeah. And just to add to that, we are up for a contract renewal. So that contract that we'll send for the K-9 currently over is up for editing and renegotiation. So big decisions coming your way in terms of the elementary middle as well. But I know working and we've learned a lot, we'll have some recommended changes to that contract. So we'll make sure to spell that out for you guys too.
That would be great to have you all come back again to walk through that contract with us. So so we can.
Even if you want to do a planning, if we do something prior to and then vote on it, so let's just do it. I mean, January, what the heck? What else? Thank you, board members. Thank you, staff. This is a long time coming.
I guess questions the board has right now for all of the players who are here. And again, thank you all for coming here. Really appreciate it. Questions, clarifications before wrapping up the presentation.
I'm assuming they'll go see the budget numbers and the recommendations when they come through.
Yes. What I would say, whatever's viewed and discussed as you do with other schools, absolutely.
This is a question more about the elementary, sorry. So as you're saying that it's sunsetting, right? So the grant is gonna be done. Is there still a lottery then to get into elementary?
So that would be defined by our bylaws and our enrollment process. If there are more students that enroll during that period, then we have seats available, we do go to lottery.
What are you thinking? I mean, that's,
I just say, I mean, the whole open enrollment thing.
Yeah.
Just makes me a little crazy with, are we serving the students that are in our district versus everybody? Not that they don't deserve to be
It-
served, but I'm just saying,
It's a
we're
fair-
here for our district first,
fair
and
question.
that's.
And Vicki, to
That's my
expand on
concern.
that, then, once we define our enrollment process, if, for instance, a student from Oshkosh School District applies, they're picked number one in our lottery, so they get the number one seat. They are, accepted into our school. They dually have to be accepted into the district. So if you guys have open enrollment closed,
Sure.
then it goes down to the North Fond du Lac School student.
I personally think this is all about feasibility. We have money. If we don't use it, we give it back to the state. And the worst thing that we could do is say, yes, we're gonna go, and all of a sudden, it's early November next year, and we have to tell parents, sorry, we're done. We can't do it. Nobody, none of us, none of them, anybody wants to do that. So I think it's all about feasibility and just finding out all the information that we can about it.
I know there are a lot of questions on the enrollment particulars and the order of events. I think we can continue offline to have that discussion because Nick's helped us a lot to understand. Meg knows, Meg's a good resource, but all kidding aside, seriously, it takes a while to understand it. And then how does that fit into the school district? That's really what we're trying to figure out now.
So my question, I guess, is will you have something that you can tell us what you need? Some more detailed information that you need to be able to continue operating, or, or specific things about how, we need this. If it's not financial, we need from the board or from the school district, this and this and this, so that we can decide if we can do that, or if, is Matt gonna bring that to us, or through his discussions with you? And,
Well, I mean, the proposal from running the high school, Steve, or through that was 2.5 FTE. And then just breaking those numbers down to give you an estimate of what and that could mean so many different things depending on who's coming in, what levels, how many years.
I mean,
But-
me personally, the 2.5, I mean, I understand it's an expense, that doesn't bother me, it's the space that's concerning to me, especially if we need so much space for 9th and 10th, and then you're gonna expand to 11th and 12th. We have to have a long-term plan for the
Right.
space. That's more concerning to me than.
What if we do this in discussions with Dr. Mino and decide, okay, and he'll work with you and say, okay, here's the stuff that you want more background on, or want to noodle and toss around and say, okay, we've got to be thinking this. I mean, we're going to put these kids, this is what happened to us. This was like being in 3 different locations in 3 years. And the first year, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't relive that if my life depended on it. And I just walked through the hallway. But the point is, we can do better than that. So
Well, and even the cost of, if the grant goes away,
yeah,
I'm assuming we're still gonna develop,
yeah, I mean,
precisely, like what
What's that?
happens there too. I think that's that'd be helpful.
Okay.
Are you asking for the K-8 cost? Are you asking for if those students came into Horace Mann?
Yeah,
Both?
both
Yeah,
to
yeah.
be,
Yeah.
fair. I don't know what the cost would be once the grant goes away, which is next summer, right? There's still gonna be a cost to materials or what are the things that we, well, that nice term we had up there that talked about all.
Capacity.
There you go, capacity.
Yeah, that's a good.
What that's still gonna cost, and then also, if not, what does that cost?
Right, because because everybody is that's there now is in the district. We're gonna have to educate them on that.
That's right.
Right, unless, again, they have choice. If it doesn't happen, they can,
The open enrollment kids. can-
right. Again, any other questions or comments before we wrap up here?
The only comment I want to thank you guys for coming tonight, and I
Yeah.
also want to thank Matt, because I know you've stepped into this and taken a big leadership role.
He
in
sure
working with
has.
these guys, and it hasn't gone unappreciated, so thank you.
You know, I have one comment. I'm a board member as well as a parent. So just requesting you folks to kind of consider this, because this is a different means of providing education. These are going to be the citizens of tomorrow. We all took pledge, right? That tells us that what our forefathers did for our country, this is our opportunity to do something for our kids so that they get this opportunity to learn and become the citizens of tomorrow. Like we have such a gifted, talented children with amazing mathematical abilities. So when we look at where we stand as a country and the mathematical range in the world, we are far behind. So these are the opportunities where we can again build America to the level we dream of. So really want to request you to kind of consider this. Thank you.
Just gonna wrap up here quickly. Great information. I think, the more that we can also connect in the future too. Again, this is not just about the integration of schools and buildings and leaders and things like that. It's also boards with boards. And I really appreciate everybody taking the time tonight to be here to do this, because this is some of those first steps to have some of these courageous conversations of like, what do we want for our district? And how can we best support our children? I think, the points that were being met tonight, like the community need, we've got, a great tradition of people who have invested and have, taken so much passion, interest in this. And it's also meeting those students and anyone who's part of that, their needs. And it's a great outlet for that. And so I really respect that. I think we also have to be considerate of, how do we get that bigger? It's, in my opinion, charter schools are built for R&D. They're research and development zones. And when we talk about like mastery transcript, when we talk about, pillars and, portraits of graduates and like learning and evidence, those things are things that we have to talk about in this whole district.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's beautiful that we have like a microcosm or a small piece, and many districts don't take that leverage and use it ever. When what they're doing and what's going on in those zones, there are some real amazing things that all of our kids could be benefited with. And so I think we've got to continue to look at that too. I think the fiscal is really important too. I mean, even though we passed referenda, there are still like shortfalls regardless. We do not know what this budget is going to look like for the next 2 years. We got to be mindful and fiscally responsible at the same time. And that comes in the staffing and who our students are and where they're coming from and how we can best support them. But in the end of the day is like, we need to do this together. And I'm so, again, happy that we were able to take some time tonight to be able to do this. It's going to be a tough decision. It is going to be a very difficult decision. But again, I hope we can uncover all those components that we need to make the best one for our kids. So with that being said, I appreciate everybody being here tonight, and thank you for your time, everyone here. And Steve, it's all yours.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second. 7:49. Roll call.
Matthew,
Yes.
Hack,
Yes.
Kowalski, yes. Jaeger,
Yes.
Keckerman.
Yes.
Meeting adjourned. Thanks again, folks.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Oriole Nation. Have a good one.
Maybe